The Democrats have launched a major campaign led by the First Lady to target women voters. But has Barack Obama earned their support? You're watching Inside Story US 2012 from Washington. Hello, I'm Shihab Rutansi. In 2008, Barack Obama won the White House with the help of a clear majority of women voters. In 2012, he'll need their support again. That's why Democrats have launched a massive drive targeting women. Their effort is being led by First Lady Michelle Obama. More popular than her husband, her name is on millions of letters sent this week to women identified as independents or Democrats. The main message: the current US President's Health Care Act is best for you and your families. The Democrats are also trying to capitalize on the Republican Party's focus on the morality of contraception. The Republicans are being accused of launching a war on women. Presidential candidate Rick Santorum says birth control is harmful to women. And if elected, his main rival, Mitt Romney, wants to stop federal funding for Planned Parenthood, the country's biggest reproductive health provider. His campaign says the government shouldn't be borrowing money from China to pay for abortions. In fact, Planned Parenthood is already not allowed to spend federal money on abortions. In 2011, state legislators enacted a record number of anti-abortion laws, leading to some protests. In one of the most controversial proposals in Virginia, every woman seeking an abortion would be required to undergo an invasive vaginal ultrasound. In response, lawmakers in at least 6 states, all women and all Democrats, are proposing regulating men's access to reproductive health care. One of those is Ohio State Senator Nina Turner. I asked her to explain her proposal.
Well, Senate Bill 307 proposes to guide men to make their right health decisions. You know, in this country, men have been preoccupied with the health of women, and I thought it only fair that we show men love. Female legislators across this country, we have abdicated our responsibility to show men love by making sure that we regulate their reproductive health. So in my bill, any man that is experiencing erectile dysfunction must have a notarized affidavit from a current partner. He must undergo a cardiac stress test. He must talk to a sex therapist to ensure that it is physical and not psychological, as well as keeping this record in his medical files. And then the doctor must explain to him some of the potential risk of erectile dysfunction drugs and other remedies available, including natural health methods or celibacy.
Now, is the purpose of this bill then simply to show that the whole debate about women's reproductive health care has gone beyond parody?
Well, it's bigger than that. It is about how women are being treated as second-class citizens in this society. It is about a right-wing Republican group that is determined to take women back to the dark ages. And since they don't care about people working, they don't care about educating our children, they don't care about putting this nation back on the right foot. You know, in 2011, over 1,100 bills were introduced in legislatures across this country. My goodness, if that energy was used towards lifting up the various states that these bills came through, what a better country this would be. So my bill simply shows men the love that they have not been receiving across the years in this country, and we want to make sure that we guide them to make the right healthcare decisions, because of course without government they wouldn't know how to do that. And
you're not alone in introducing legislation of a similar nature. In I think Oklahoma, there's these every sperm is sacred amendments or bills or proposals. Those specifically, I suppose, geared to the whole issue of personhood, this idea that a fertilized egg is a legal person. But what is going on then across the country? Why suddenly are we seeing so much activity around female reproductive health? What happened?
I think it's really revealing a lack of ability by policymakers to tackle the real issues. Women have been easy targets in this country and across the world, and hopefully our sisters all over the world will unite and to speak with one voice that women will not be treated as second-class citizens. But since a lot of the male leaders in this country lack what it takes to tackle the real issues, they are victimizing women. And we're going back in time, and it's a dark ugly time in America's history and also in the world. But I can tell you today that women are not going back. We are going to continue to fight, and we're going to stand up for future generations of women, not only in the United States, but all over the world.
Do you think this is simply, though, a matter of religion, or is there something else at play here?
I mean, they're using religion as an excuse. You know, the God that I serve gives free choice, and those folks who believe in the creator of this universe know that. He gave humankind free choice. So who are we to take away that free choice, especially when it comes to a woman's right to choose? What happened to personal liberty? What happened to freedom and justice? I guess all of that stops when it comes to the woman. So a lot of these religious groups are conveniently trying to use God as an excuse to oppress women, and we're not going for it.
So, what has Barack Obama done for women voters in the last 4 years, and can he capture their support this year? And what impact might the debate over contraception have? We're joined from New York by Emily Douglas, senior editor at The Nation magazine. Here in the studio, we're joined by Sabrina Schaeffer, executive director of the conservative group, the Independent Women's Forum, and Kim Gandy, vice president of the Feminist Majority Foundation. Sabrina Schaeffer, then, how did the issue of reproductive rights come to the fore this year? Wasn't the whole issue supposed to be the economy?
Yeah, I thought so. And actually, it's kind of interesting that we're having this whole discussion about a war on women when the Wall Street Journal is reporting today that the economy is actually doing much better. Unemployment has dropped down into under 8%. There's a lot of signs that we're moving in the right direction. But I think that in the background, Democrats know that in 2010, the Republicans, for the first time in 20 years, did close the gender gap. And so I think that that has been sort of looming as we approach November. And there's concern now, how do we make sure we keep women on our side?
Now, that's fascinating, Kim Gandy, because actually the conventional narrative is this is a self-inflicted blow perhaps to the Republicans. They began talking about issues like contraception and in fact have distracted themselves from the economy.
Yeah, I don't think it was a Democrat that introduced the vaginal ultrasound bill in Virginia. I don't think any Democrats made Rush Limbaugh call Sandra Fluke a slut or a prostitute. I really don't think the Democrats were behind any of that.
Well, they're taking advantage of it now.
I think it is, well, as well they should, because the women of this country need to know the potential of what's out there, and they need to know where these candidates stand. They need to know that Mitt Romney is talking about getting rid of Planned Parenthood.
Of course, Rush Limbaugh does not represent the Republican Party, nor does he represent all conservatives, and he's far from alone. On the left, we have plenty, from the Bill Maher's to the Keith Olbermanns, who have been just absolutely hideous in their comments towards women, and both women on the left and on the right. So,
Emily Douglas, though, then it's not just on the campaign trail that we're seeing these issues come to the fore. It is the record number of anti-abortion laws being passed. Is this part of some wider social phenomenon, a sudden flowering of conservatism and religious, the religious right on social issues, or is there something else afoot?
Well, it does seem as though Republicans like Mitt Romney feel the need to run to the right. And so I think that he's trying to prove that he's, a choice that the religious conservatives can stand behind. And so he hasn't condemned Limbaugh. I just wanted to make that point to Sabrina's earlier
Rush
point.
Limbaugh is the sort of the shock jock DJ of the right who, says pretty inflammatory things from attacking President Obama and liberals of any stripe and so forth. Right? Yes. Go on.
Right, that's correct. So I think it's not isolated. This attack on women isn't isolated to a small faction of the Republican Party. I think they're making that their mission, and I don't think that they have an agenda on jobs. I don't think they have an agenda on employment, and therefore they're going for what they think riles up their base. But I think if we've seen reporting that women, moderate, independent women, are taking a second look at Obama in the wake of these attacks. I think they know that Republicans don't have their health interests at heart.
Clearly, a lot of this does come, though, from the 2010 legislative victories of the Republicans, both at the congressional and local level. It's interesting, we've often talked about how following that, a lot of very similar legislation started appearing on voter IDs or to try and reduce union influence. And then that's often traced back to some sort of centralized brain trust where some of this legislation is coming from. Is there any evidence that there's a similar narrative at play here on women's reproductive health, Kim?
Oh, there's no question that we see these same kinds of bills being introduced over and over. I think there are 8 states that have these personhood bills that essentially would make the fertilized eggs rights compete with the rights of the woman, and would in fact outlaw some forms of birth control and a variety of issues that were so serious that even the very conservative voters in Mississippi defeated it. But that hasn't kept it from coming up in other states, as well as these ultrasound bills like the one in Virginia have passed in some states and are coming up in other states. So these definitely are spreading around the country.
But I think, you know, Kim's pointing out something that's so important, which is why we don't want government in the business of healthcare. I mean, I think that ultimately this kind of overreach goes both ways. And so once the cat is out of the bag, you know, it may be that you wanted you know, the left wanted something like Obamacare, but then guess what? They don't like it when conservatives are, you know, very socially conservatives are in power, and suddenly they don't like the kind of legislation that they might try to pass through. I mean, I'm opposed to any kind of government intervention in healthcare. I think the best thing that we could strive for is individual, patient-centered, you know, choice in healthcare. And so all of these
utter privatization, though.
Yeah, I want a free market in all of this.
It's interesting, though. So these issues were already then pretty important going into this election cycle. I think what's been fascinating, though, is how it's moved beyond, though, abortion and, you know, the usual fault lines to issues like contraception. Republican presidential candidate Rick Santorum, in particular, has provoked debate because of his comments on this issue, which seemed to expand the whole framework of the discussion. This is what Santorum had to say.
One of the things I will talk about that no president has talked about before is I think the dangers of contraception in this country, the whole sexual libertine idea. And many in the Christian faith have said, well, that's okay. I mean, you know, contraception's okay. It's not okay because it's a license to do things in the sexual realm that is counter to how things are supposed to be. They're supposed to be within marriage.
Now, Kim Gandy, I mean, was that an amazingly radical moment? I mean, this isn't simply now about abortion. This is about contraception and birth control as a whole.
It's a radical public moment. It's not a radical private moment. You could find interviews I've done over the last 10 years where I've said, this isn't really only about abortion. This is about birth control. Read my lips, they're going to go after birth control next. And in fact, they've just started being public about it. But a lot of the anti-abortion leaders over the years have been publicly quoted as being against birth control. The fact that it's coming out of the mouth of a presidential candidate is really what makes it different. It's being said in public and not in private.
Sabrina Schaeffer, one of the reasons why this doesn't often, or it's not often said publicly, though it's thought, is because, frankly, it's an incredibly unpopular stance in the United States, and there is now a sense that this has all backfired for Santorum, if not in the Republican primaries amongst the far-right base, but it has in the nation as a whole. The birth control isn't a matter of religious freedom or religious choice. It is actually a matter of women's health.
Well, yeah, I think in this sense, the left and the right are sort of talking past each other. I mean, I think the left has framed this as a women's health issue, and in some respects it is. The right's framed this as a religious freedom issue, which in some respects it is. I like to think that this is an individual choice issue. And sort of more to the point, you know, a friend of mine said, look, the contraception mandate is as much about birth control as the American Revolution was about tea. This is about the fundamental role of government and that relationship between citizen and state. And I think that's what this whole conversation should be about, instead of how many women are using birth control.
Isn't the irony there, though, that what the Republicans are advocating here is the ultimate form of government control over people's...
Yeah, and I'm not an advocate for the GOP. I mean, I'm here to represent...
But how does this fit into that usual Republican narrative of small government if what they're actually advocating is the largest government possible on people's health
Right,
care?
I think that there are...
the decisions they make.
I think there is confusion on these state-level bills when they are urging sort of greater government intervention. I do disagree with those bills.
Emily Douglas, help us understand then what's going on. Is this simply then an offshoot of a particularly bitter primary season where the Republican are looking for their soul, and then once a candidate is sorted out, they'll go back to more moderate positions? Or is there a sense that the Republican Party could decide to become an advocate of a more perhaps theocratic view of healthcare and these issues and so forth?
Well, I think the Affordable Care Act is remarkable in that it does provide a lot of wins for women and women's health. One of those is the access to no-cost birth control. Right. And I think that's something that a vast majority of American women want, and that's something that Republicans are realizing that lots of women want, but is sort of counter to their orthodoxy. And so I think that this struggle may go on for quite some time, where all of a sudden people are starting to talk about how women should have access to birth control, what a tremendous impact it has for good on women's participation in the workforce, on women's ability to protect their health and safely space their pregnancies. And I think that Republicans are being confronted now with the fact that they back a very unpopular point of view.
But do they back it? I mean, we look at Mitt Romney, for example, who clearly wasn't against Planned Parenthood when he was governor, but now is being forced into this position. And in fact, actually, there are already attack ads by the Democrats at this early stage now attacking Romney on the positions he's now taken, which of course will be repeated in the event that he is the Republican nominee. Here's one advert that the Democrats came up with.
Mitt Romney's coming to Illinois and looking for support from women. But here's what women need to know about Mitt Romney. Romney says he wants to get rid of Planned Parenthood, ending federal support for critical health care services like cancer screenings for thousands of women here in Illinois.
Planned Parenthood, we're going to get rid of that.
He supports legislation to allow employers to deny women affordable access to health care services like contraception. He supports extreme policies that would take away a woman's right to choose and ban many forms of birth control, including the pill.
Sabrina Schaeffer, it's amazing the Democrats then running ads already when the Republicans haven't got a nominee yet. Right. But I mean, that would be the sort of attack ad you would see in the event of an election if he was the nominee. And there's no way really that's a popular position. He would lose.
No, and I think that I mean, look. You know, Emily is making some points that they have to push back on. I mean, the fact is, sort of feminist groups are playing gender politics here, and it's gone awry. They tried to negotiate specific benefits in a bill in the Affordable Care Act, which is free mandated birth control. But we shouldn't be mandating that an employer or a health insurance company, for that matter, pays for that. Nor should I have to pay for a great uncle's Viagra. I mean, it's just absolutely it shouldn't be mandated. So that's the first thing. But that has nothing, because that has nothing to do with women's right to choose to use birth control. And I think that those two things are too often being conflated right now.
Isn't it because of the nature of the healthcare system that we have, even under Obamacare? There is no public option. People are reliant on their employers to give them the insurance. So it has to be.
Well, people do buy. I mean, at the Independent Women's Forum, we have employees who purchase their own health insurance. I'm on my husband's health insurance, but it's a health savings account. We make choices every single day on the kinds of health care that we receive and what we're paying for.
Let me make a correction to something that Sabrina just said. Feminists didn't advocate the inclusion of contraception. We didn't make the decision. Obviously, we're happy with the decision, but the recommendation was made by the nonpartisan National Institutes of Health, which were charged with making a decision about what should be included in preventive health care. And they recommended cancer screenings, pap smears,
this is the problem, though.
Mammograms, and contraception is in the opinion of
and
the
birth control
National
was never really a
Institutes of
partisan
Health.
issue. Richard Nixon, of course, after all, began federal funding for birth control and so forth.
Sure,
But
and
the
so
problem is that
it's part of the preventive health care package that was recommended by the nonpartisan National Institutes of Health and adopted by the Secretary of Health and Human Services as presented.
But the problem is that these benefits, or the way that they're being framed as benefits for women, actually cost women. I mean, these benefits are not free. They cost us in freedom, and they cost us in higher taxes.
As they do, what do you mean, as men too? You mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why should a young 23-year-old man who's maybe trying to pay off college loans be paying for my birth control, for me to have free birth control, or for me to have a baby, for that matter? These are decisions that my husband and I would make together and say, what is in our budget? We can pay for health insurance that covers that.
I mean, it's good to widen this out, perhaps, because women's issues aren't simply about abortion and contraception. And we thought we'd take a look at some of the other issues that disproportionately affect women. According to the National Women's Law Center, nearly 6 out of 10 poor adults are women, and over 17 million women in the US live in poverty. Women still face discrimination in the workplace, earning on average only 77 cents for every dollar earned by a man. A major focus of women's rights groups is also retirement provisions. Women have lower lifetime earnings and live longer, so they want safeguards for social security and pensions. And Kim, Gandy, there was a sense that up until this particular issue came about, there was some disappointment with President Obama. Of course, there was the Affordable Health Care Act, but there was a sense he wasn't really dealing with poverty as a whole, and which, of course, disproportionately affects women more. So, but this is kind of getting him off the hook. He's now able to say, look, well, it could be a lot worse. Not only wouldn't you get what I've given you, but you'd also get a theocratic view of your womb.
Well, you know, there is always a long list of wants and needs, and with any given constituency group, you're going to say, we want this and this and this, and if I got the first three, I didn't get the fourth one, I'm going to complain that I didn't get that. Or, you know, we all do that. But the reality is that this administration has made enormous strides, and the Affordable Care Act alone in covering dramatically covering
but it could have been a lot better.
Health
I mean, you mentioned the public option would have made things a lot
We'd love to have had the public option.
He didn't fight for it. I mean, so then isn't he getting away with that? Wouldn't you prefer that he'd fought for it?
Well, as you realize, the Affordable Care Act barely passed. Barely passed. And obviously, if it had been any stronger, it wouldn't have been able to pass. I think that we got as much as we could have gotten at the time, and it does expand access to health care to 14 million poor people.
Can I just add that, you know, my understanding of the women's liberation movement was that for the first time we were going to stop talking about women's bodies entirely. We have made this entire conversation about what women want around their reproductive tract.
But only because the conservatives have made that.
No, it's not just the conservatives. This is ridiculous. I'm sitting here with two Democrats. I mean, I'm pretty aware that the conversation is being directed, it's not one-sided. And the fact is, what women want is the same thing that men want. They want economic growth, they want job growth, they want to rein in the national debt, they want more choice and decision-making power in their lives. And the kind of government we have right now is not allowing
Emily
that.
Douglas, I mean, isn't that the point, though? This has gotten scrutiny of Obama's record on a lot of those issues over the last 4 years. It's got him off the hook, because there was disappointment on the left as well about this, but because these issues have been brought up, though, he's getting away with it, isn't he?
Well, I think Kim spoke very eloquently to the challenges that any movement has in dealing with an elected official. You know, even a president is not able to do absolutely everything that would be on his agenda or our agenda.
But for example, Lilly Ledbetter, then the first bit of legislation he signed into law for equal pay for women and men, no change happened after he signed that, did it?
Well, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act corrected a Supreme Court decision that created an untenably short window during which workers could bring complaints of pay discrimination. It's true that there's lots still to do about fair pay, and it's also true that when Obama talks about it publicly, he doesn't really talk about the other unfinished parts of this. But you know, I think that means that the pressure needs to be on from women's groups to get him to focus on.
But is that pressure on as long as we've got an extreme right-wing theocratic agenda underway? You know,
the conversation's getting a little bit more extreme, you hear.
Well, I mean, that's how it's being presented to some of those on the left, anyway. Are these real victories that Obama has made on behalf of women, or are they symbolic victories? Are they defensive victories? I think that's a term you've once used. Are they symbolic defeats that he's had? I mean, what is his record on women's rights over the last 4 years beyond the healthcare provision, which could have been better?
Well, it's certainly not symbolic wins. These wins are real. I mean, real women are going to actually access birth control for, you know, more affordably. You know, before the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies could charge women more money than men.
But as far as poverty, as far as you know, union organizing, as far as education, as far as again all these other issues that are part of, you know, beyond simply the healthcare debate, which is so focused on when we talk about women, how has Obama done? I suppose is the question. Perhaps Kim Gandy, very last word.
Well, yeah, certainly, as I mentioned, there's been a real expansion of access to health care to low-income people. Was a real focus on, in the economic stimulus, what they called shovel-ready jobs, which also was very heavily focused on people who were, you know, non-college educated,
on men,
and yeah, heavily on men. Although that did shift, and there was an increased focus on retaining teachers and social workers and other groups that were harder hit. But the other thing that I wanted to mention is a real emphasis from this administration on violence against women. which is, I hate to use the term epidemic, but it really is. There's an enormous amount of violence against women, both domestic violence and also rape and sexual assault. And this administration, one of the first things out of the box was to create a White House Special Advisor on Violence Against Women. Vice President Joe Biden, original author of the Violence Against Women Act. There's been a tremendous focus on expanding the ways of addressing violence against women, including a whole lot of extra funding for police departments and law enforcement to work on prevention and apprehension.
But
Last word.
Okay, if you're talking about women in poverty, the best thing for women, as for men, is an expanding economy, and we're going to get that through fewer regulations, through less government involvement, and allowing individuals more choice. And so I think all of this ultimately comes down to
right. And the left and right
healthcare.
are in some ways disappointed that Mr. Obama hasn't done exactly what they wanted on the economy,
Right.
but is disappointed both to some extent, I suppose. Sabrina Schaeffer, thank you very much. Kim Gandy, thank you. And Emily Douglas, thanks very much from New York. That's all from the Inside Story team here in Washington, D.C. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, where you can find more information about the program. And we want to hear from you. Tell us what stories you think we should be covering. Send your ideas to us directly at InsideStory@aljazeera.net.